In the vast, tumultuous realm of the warp, where reality bends and sanity frays, there exist entities that defy conventional understanding. Among these, the warp ghosts stand as a chilling enigma, even to those well-versed in the horrors of the immaterium. These spectral beings, neither fully demon nor entirely separate from the souls of the departed, haunt the boundaries between real space and the warp, their very existence a testament to the unfathomable nature of the Empyrean tides. The warp ghosts first came to the attention of Imperial scholars during the aftermath of the Horus Heresy, a time when the barriers between reality and the immaterium were at their weakest. Astropaths and navigators reported fleeting glimpses of ethereal forms that seemed to echo with the anguish of lost souls, yet moved with a purpose that belied mere psychic echoes. These encounters, initially dismissed as hallucinations brought on by the stress of warp travel, soon became too numerous and consistent to ignore. As the millennia passed, the phenomenon of warp ghosts grew more pronounced, their manifestations more frequent and tangible. Imperial Navy vessels reported inexplicable malfunctions and crew disappearances during warp jumps, often accompanied by sightings of translucent humanoid figures that phased through bulkheads as if they were mist. On worlds close to warp storms or psychic anomalies, entire populations spoke of whispers in the night and fleeting shadows that seemed to carry the weight of forgotten memories. The Ordo Malleus of the Inquisition, ever vigilant against the threats of the immaterium, began to compile reports and testimonies related to these ghostly entities. Their investigations revealed a disturbing pattern. The warp ghosts seemed to be drawn to areas of intense psychic activity or emotional resonance, particularly those marked by great tragedy or lingering regret. This led some inquisitors to theorize that the ghosts were manifestations of unresolved psychic energy, perhaps even the remnants of souls unable to fully transition into the warp. However, as more data was gathered, it became clear that the warp ghosts were far more than simple psychic echoes. Encounters with these entities often left lasting effects on both individuals and the fabric of reality itself. Survivors of close encounters reported experiencing vivid, often traumatic visions of past events or possible futures. In some cases, physical laws seemed to warp in the wake of a ghost's passage, leading to localized temporal anomalies or spontaneous mutations in living tissue. The true nature and origin of the warp ghosts remain a subject of fierce debate among the Imperium's foremost experts on the immaterium. Some posit that they are a new form of warp entity, born from the ever-shifting currents of the Empyrean. Others suggest they might be the result of failed attempts by the souls of the dead to navigate the treacherous tides of the warp, becoming trapped in a state between existence and oblivion. More radical theories propose that the ghosts are the product of forbidden experiments in warp technology, perhaps dating back to the Dark Age of technology or even earlier. What is certain is that the presence of warp ghosts has become an increasingly significant factor in the Imperium's ongoing struggle against the forces of chaos. Their ability to manifest in real space, however briefly, poses a unique threat to Imperial security and the sanctity of the human soul. The Adeptus Mechanicus has reported incidents of warp ghosts interfering with sensitive equipment, particularly devices designed to interact with or shield against the warp. This has led to a renewed focus on developing technologies to detect and potentially contain these ethereal intruders. As the 41st millennium draws to a close and the galaxy is torn asunder by the Great Rift, the phenomenon of warp ghosts has taken on new and terrifying dimensions. With the veil between real space and the immaterium stretched gossamer thin, these spectral entities have begun to manifest in greater numbers and with increased potency. Entire sectors have reported a surge in ghost-like activity, with some worlds falling silent after mass sightings of ethereal hosts descending from turbulent skies. The Imperium of man, beset on all sides by enemies both material and immaterial, now faces a threat that challenges the very foundations of its understanding of life, death, and the nature of the soul. As the lines between reality and the warp continue to blur, the warp ghosts stand as harbingers of a new age of uncertainty and peril, their spectral forms a grim reminder of the price of treading the precipice between two realms. In this time of unprecedented danger, the study and confrontation of warp ghosts has become a matter of utmost importance for the survival of humanity. From the highest spires of Terra to the most distant frontier worlds, those who guard the Imperium must now contend with an enemy that defies conventional warfare and challenges the very nature of existence itself. The saga of the warp ghosts, a chilling testament to the horrors that lurk beyond the veil of reality, continues to unfold, its final chapters yet to be written in the annals of Imperial history. The Imperium of Man stands as the primary bulwark against the insidious threat of warp ghosts. At the forefront of this struggle is the Ordo Malleus, a specialized branch of the Inquisition dedicated to combating demonic incursions and warp-based phenomena. Their inquisitors, armed with arcane knowledge and potent psychic defenses, lead the charge in investigating and neutralizing warp ghost manifestations across the galaxy. Working in tandem with the Ordo Malleus are the Grey Knights, the secretive and formidable Space Marine chapter specifically created to battle the forces of chaos. Their unique psychic abilities and specially crafted war gear make them particularly effective against ethereal threats like warp ghosts. Grey Knight strike teams are often deployed to areas experiencing heightened ghostly activity, their mere presence enough to banish lesser manifestations. The Adeptus Mechanicus plays a crucial role in the study and containment of warp ghosts. Their tech priests labor tirelessly to develop new technologies capable of detecting, analyzing, and potentially neutralizing these spectral entities. Specialized cogitators and auspex arrays designed to sense warp anomalies have become standard equipment on many Imperial vessels and outposts in high-risk areas. Within the ranks of the Imperial Navy, a new breed of officers has emerged, colloquially known as ghost hunters. These individuals, often possessing latent psychic abilities, have demonstrated a knack for anticipating and countering warp ghost incursions during warp travel. Their intuition and quick thinking have saved countless lives and vessels from the perils of ghostly encounters in the Immaterium. The Ecclesiarchy, ever vigilant against threats to the souls of the faithful, has taken a keen interest in the phenomenon of warp ghosts. Some within the Church view these entities as a manifestation of the Emperor's judgment, while others see them as a dire threat to the sanctity of human souls. Ministorum priests often accompany Imperial forces on anti-ghost operations, their fervent prayers and faith-fueled rituals providing a measure of protection against spectral influences. On the fringes of Imperial space, rogue traders have found both peril and opportunity in the rise of warp ghosts. Some daring captains have made fortunes by salvaging vessels abandoned after ghost encounters, while others offer their services as guides through warp routes known to be haunted by these entities. Their knowledge of the galaxy's hidden corners and willingness to take risks make them valuable, if not always trustworthy, allies in the fight against this ethereal menace. The Navis Nobilitae, the noble houses that produce the Imperium's navigators, have been profoundly affected by the emergence of warp ghosts. Navigators, with their unique ability to perceive the warp, are often the first to detect the presence of these entities during space travel. Many navigator houses have developed specialized training and techniques to shield their members from ghostly influences and to plot safer courses through ghost-infested regions of the warp. Among the psychers of the Imperium, a select few have demonstrated an affinity for communicating with or repelling warp ghosts. These individuals, often referred to as mediums or exorcists, are highly sought after by both the Inquisition and the Adeptus Astra Telepathica. Their abilities, while poorly understood and potentially dangerous, provide valuable insights into the nature and motivations of warp ghosts. Outside the Imperium's borders, other factions grapple with the phenomenon in their own ways. The Eldari, with their deep connection to the warp and extensive experience with psychic phenomena, view warp ghosts with a mixture of fascination and dread. Some farseers believe these entities to be fragmented echoes of their own fallen kin, while others see them as harbingers of an even greater calamity lurking on the horizon. The forces of chaos, ever opportunistic, have sought to harness the power of warp ghosts for their own nefarious purposes. Chaos sorcerers and demon princes experiment with ways to bind these entities to their will, seeing them as potential weapons to be unleashed upon the material realm. These efforts have met with mixed success, often resulting in catastrophic backlashes that consume the would-be masters. Necron dynasties, awakening to a galaxy plagued by new warp-based threats, have turned their ancient technologies towards combating warp ghosts. Their null field matrices and advanced anti-warp weaponry provide a unique counterpoint to the Imperium's more faith and psychic-based approaches. Some Necron cryptex have even attempted to capture and study warp ghosts, seeking to unravel the mysteries of these entities that seem to defy the laws of both real space and the immaterium. The Tau Empire, with its limited understanding of the warp, finds itself particularly vulnerable to warp ghost incursions. As they expand their sphere of influence, Tau colonies and expeditionary fleets increasingly encounter these phenomena, forcing their Earth-caste scientists and Water-caste diplomats to seek aid and information from other races more experienced in dealing with warp-based threats. Orc Wachs have demonstrated a surprising resilience to the effects of warp ghosts, their innate psychic field, and the sheer force of their collective belief seeming to offer some protection against spectral influences. Some Orc Weird Boys have even claimed to be able to talk to the ghosts, although the veracity and coherence of these communications remain highly dubious. As the threat of warp ghosts continues to grow, new alliances and conflicts emerge across the galaxy. The shared danger has led to unprecedented cooperation between some factions, while others seek to exploit the chaos for their own gain. In this shifting landscape of power and peril, the ability to understand and counter warp ghosts may well determine the fate of entire civilizations. The genesis of warp ghosts can be traced to the tumultuous events surrounding the Horus Heresy. As the galaxy burned in the fires of civil war, the barriers between real space and the warp weakened dramatically. The psychic anguish of billions of souls, coupled with the raw power unleashed by godlike beings, created ripples in the fabric of reality that would persist for millennia. In the aftermath of the heresy, as the Imperium struggled to rebuild, reports of strange phenomena began to surface. Ship captains spoke of eerily familiar faces glimpsed in the swirling chaos of warp travel. Astropaths reported whispers that seemed to carry the weight of lost memories. At first, these occurrences were dismissed as the lingering trauma of a galaxy-spanning conflict. However, as centuries passed, the incidents grew more frequent and tangible. During the Nova Terra interregnum, when the Imperium was split in twain, the first documented encounter with a fully manifested warp ghost occurred. On the frontier world of Atropos IV, an entire garrison reported seeing the spectral form of their long-dead commander, leading them to victory against a Xenos incursion before vanishing into thin air. This event marked a turning point in the Imperium's understanding of the phenomenon. The Ordo Malleus, already stretched thin by the challenges of reunification, found itself facing a new and perplexing threat. Initial theories suggested that warp ghosts were simply demons masquerading as the dead, but this hypothesis failed to account for the entity's seemingly non-hostile nature in many encounters. As the age of apostasy dawned, bringing with it new turmoil and psychic disturbances, warp ghost sightings increased exponentially. The lines between faith, superstition, and genuine supernatural encounters blurred. Some worlds embraced the appearances of these spectral forms as divine messages, while others descended into paranoia and witch hunts. The rise of Sebastian Thor and the subsequent reforms brought a brief respite as the stabilization of the Imperium seemed to calm the warp. However, this period of relative quiet allowed for more systematic study of the phenomenon. Inquisitorial scholars began to notice patterns in ghost manifestations, often tied to locations or objects of great emotional significance. The 13th Black Crusade marked another surge in warp ghost activity. As Abaddon the Despoiler's forces ravaged the Cadian Gate, the veil between realities thinned once more. Imperial defenders reported seeing ghostly legions fighting alongside them, bearing the heraldry of long-destroyed chapters and regiments. These manifestations, while heartening to the beleaguered Imperials, raised troubling questions about the nature of the soul and its fate in the turbulent tides of the warp. The fall of Cadia and the subsequent formation of the Great Rift ushered in a new era of warp ghost prevalence. With reality itself sundered, the barriers holding back these entities weakened dramatically. Entire sectors found themselves plagued by ghostly apparitions, some benign, others malevolent, but all indicative of a fundamental shift in the relationship between real space and the immaterium. Technological advancements played a crucial role in the growing warp ghost crisis. The Dark Age of technology had seen the development of warp-based technologies far beyond the comprehension of the Imperium's current tech priests. As archaeotech relics were unearthed and reactivated, many inadvertently served as conduits for warp ghosts, drawing them into real space or even creating new forms of spectral entities. The Adeptus Mechanicus, in their quest for knowledge, sometimes exacerbated the situation. Experiments in warp technology, often conducted with incomplete understanding, opened rifts that allowed warp ghosts to slip through. The infamous Ghoul incident saw an entire Forge world overrun by spectral forms after the activation of a recovered STC fragment. Psychers, always at the forefront of humanity's interaction with the warp, found themselves particularly susceptible to warp ghost influences. The rigorous training regimes of the Adeptus Astra Telepathica had to be revised, incorporating new techniques to shield the mind from ghostly intrusions. Despite these precautions, some Psychers developed a symbiotic relationship with warp ghosts, their powers enhanced but their grasp on reality increasingly tenuous. The spread of warp ghost phenomena across the galaxy did not go unnoticed by Xenos races. Eldari Farseers, with their deep understanding of the warp, recognized the danger these entities posed to the already fragile fabric of reality. Some craft worlds dedicated entire hosts of warlocks to combating warp ghost incursions, seeing it as a vital part of their species' survival. Necron dynasties, awakening to find the galaxy in turmoil, viewed the proliferation of warp ghosts as further evidence of the corrupt influence of the Immaterium. Their null field technology, designed to sever the connection between real space and the warp, proved effective in banishing some forms of warp ghosts. However, it also attracted the attention of more powerful spectral entities, drawn to the void created by the Necron's anti-warp fields. As the Imperium and other factions grappled with the growing warp ghost threat, a disturbing pattern emerged. Zones of increased ghostly activity often presaged greater calamities, demonic incursions, warp storms, or even the emergence of new chaos cults. This realization led to the formation of specialized Ghost Watcher units within the Inquisition, tasked with monitoring warp ghost phenomena as a means of predicting and preventing larger-scale, warp-based threats. The psychological impact of widespread warp ghost encounters cannot be overstated. Imperial citizens, already living in a galaxy fraught with danger, now faced the prospect of their very souls being at risk. The ecclesiarchy struggled to provide spiritual guidance, their doctrines ill-equipped to deal with the complex metaphysical questions raised by the existence of warp ghosts. The proliferation of warp ghosts across the galaxy unfolded in distinct phases, each marked by escalating intensity and far-reaching consequences. Initially, manifestations were sporadic and fleeting, often dismissed as hallucinations or warp-induced mirages. However, as the phenomenon gained momentum, its impact became impossible to ignore. The first widespread ghost sightings occurred in the aftermath of major conflicts, particularly those with significant psychic elements. The Gothic War saw a surge in spectral activity, with Imperial Navy vessels reporting encounters with phantom ships that mirrored vessels lost in previous engagements. These apparitions, while unsettling, rarely posed direct threats, instead serving as eerie reminders of the war's toll. As the millennium progressed, the nature of warp ghost manifestations evolved. No longer confined to echo past events, these entities began displaying signs of autonomy and purpose. The Garin Nebula incident marked a turning point, as an entire subsector fell silent following reports of ghostly armadas assembling in the void. When Imperial forces arrived to investigate, they found worlds locked in battles against enemies only half perceived, blurring the lines between past conflicts and present reality. The Inquisition's response to these escalating events was swift but fragmented. Different ordos offered conflicting interpretations of the phenomenon, leading to a multitude of approaches. The Ordo Malleus viewed warp ghosts as a new form of demonic incursion, advocating for aggressive banishment protocols. In contrast, the Ordo Xenos suspected Xenos involvement, particularly focusing on the potential manipulation of human souls by entities like the Necrons or the Hrud. This lack of consensus hampered early efforts to combat the spread of warp ghosts effectively. The Ordo Chronos, a lesser-known branch of the Inquisition specializing in temporal anomalies, briefly took the lead in studying the phenomenon. Their research suggested links between warp ghost manifestations and fluctuations in the time stream, hinting at a more complex nature to these entities than previously thought. However, the mysterious disappearance of key Ordo Chronos personnel halted this line of inquiry, leaving many questions unanswered. As ghost encounters became more common, patterns began to emerge. Certain locations acted as focal points for spectral activity, often sites of great historical significance or psychic resonance. The Adeptus Mechanicus identified several Forge worlds as hotspots, correlating increased ghost sightings with the activation of ancient archaeotech devices. This led to heated debates within the Mechanicus, with some tech priests advocating for the continued exploration of these technologies, while others warned of the dangers of meddling with forces beyond their comprehension. The Space Marines, stalwart defenders of humanity, found themselves on the front lines of this new ethereal war. Chapter histories speak of campaigns against foes that shifted between corporeal and incorporeal forms, requiring adaptations in both tactics and technology. The Iron Hands chapter pioneered the use of phase shift weaponry, designed to affect both material and immaterial targets. Meanwhile, the Ultramarines emphasized flexibility in combat doctrine, developing strategies to counter the unpredictable nature of warp ghost incursions. As the phenomenon spread, its effects on civilian populations became a pressing concern. Entire hive cities reported mass hauntings, with ghostly figures walking through walls and whispering forgotten secrets. These events often preceded outbreaks of mass hysteria or the emergence of cult activity. The Adeptus Arbites found themselves ill-equipped to handle crimes involving spectral perpetrators or victims, leading to the formation of specialized phantom patrols trained in both law enforcement and rudimentary psychic defense. The ecclesiarchy played a crucial role in maintaining public order during this tumultuous period. Ministorum priests wove tales of warp ghosts into imperial doctrine, portraying them as tests of faith or manifestations of the emperor's will. While this approach helped calm the masses, it also led to the rise of new sects and interpretations of imperial creed, some walking a fine line between faith and heresy. Astropaths and navigators, already burdened with the perilous task of guiding humanity through the warp, now faced additional challenges. Many reported difficulty distinguishing between genuine warp currents and the misleading trails left by warp ghosts. This led to a series of high-profile mishaps, including the loss of an entire battle fleet that followed a ghostly beacon into a previously uncharted warp storm. In response, the Navis Nobilitae instituted rigorous new training protocols, emphasizing techniques to discern true warp signatures from spectral lures. The Adeptus Mechanicus's efforts to understand and counteract warp ghosts led to significant technological advancements. The development of the Ghost Helm, a modified psychic hood capable of filtering out spectral interference, proved invaluable for psychers operating in heavily haunted areas. Similarly, the Spirit Cage, a containment device designed to trap and study warp ghosts, offered new insights into their nature, though its use remained highly controversial due to the risks involved in capturing such entities. As the Imperium grappled with this new reality, other factions sought to exploit the situation. Chaos cults saw the proliferation of warp ghosts as a sign of the weakening barrier between real space and the immaterium, redoubling their efforts to bring about demonic incursions. Gene stealer cults, particularly those in the early stages of infiltration, used the confusion caused by ghost sightings as cover for their activities, sometimes even manipulating beliefs about the nature of these apparitions to further their own agendas. The Tau Empire, expanding into regions plagued by warp ghost activity, found their technology-focused approach to warfare severely tested. Their initial skepticism about the phenomenon quickly gave way to pragmatic adaptation, with Earth-caste scientists working feverishly to develop countermeasures. The resulting Ghost Drone project, while only partially successful, demonstrated the Tau's ability to rapidly iterate and adapt to new threats. As the 41st millennium drew to a close, the phenomenon of warp ghosts had become an integral part of the galaxy's turbulent tapestry. From the highest spires of Terra to the most distant frontier worlds, the spectral entities served as a constant reminder of the thin veil separating reality from the horrors of the warp. The Imperium's response, a mix of technological innovation, spiritual adaptation, and sheer human resilience, would shape its approach to this and other warp-based threats for millennia to come. The Geisttide incident marked a cataclysmic turning point in the Imperium's struggle against warp ghosts. It began on the fortress world of Helios Secundus, a linchpin in the defenses of the Segmentum Solar. For centuries, Helios Secundus had stood as an unassailable bastion, its void shields and planetary defense systems repelling countless threats. On the eve of the planet's millennial celebration, astropathic choirs detected an anomaly in the warp. Initial readings suggested a minor fluctuation, nothing out of the ordinary for a world so close to Terra's psychic beacon. However, within hours, the situation escalated beyond all predictions. Witnesses described a tide of spectral forms pouring from the sky, their ethereal bodies passing through solid matter as if it were mist. Unlike previous warp ghost encounters, these entities moved with singular purpose, converging on the planet's central hive city. Defensive systems designed to repel material threats proved useless against the incorporeal invaders. As panic spread, the planet's governor activated emergency protocols calling for immediate reinforcements. The response was swift, with Grey Knights and inquisitorial forces dispatched from nearby sectors. But even these elite units found themselves ill-prepared for the scale of the incursion. The turning point came when a young Adeptus Mechanicus Megos, Syra 92, made a startling discovery. Analyzing data from the planet's ancient void shield generators, she noticed patterns in the ghost's movements that corresponded to fluctuations in the shield's energy fields. This insight led to a daring plan. By recalibrating the void shields to resonate at specific frequencies, they might be able to disrupt the warp ghost's ability to manifest. Implementation of Syra 92's theory required a perilous mission to the heart of the invaded hive city. A strike team composed of Grey Knights, Skitari, and the Magos herself fought their way through streets filled with spectral horrors. Eyewitness accounts speak of phantasmal armies clashing, the ghosts of long-dead warriors rising to defend their home one last time. At the shield generator's control center, Syra 92 worked feverishly to adjust the ancient machinery. As she inputted the final calculations, a massive surge of energy pulsed through the city. For a moment, the world seemed to hold its breath. Then, like mist before the morning sun, the warp ghosts began to dissipate. The victory, while decisive, came at a heavy cost. Large portions of the Hive City lay in ruins, its population decimated. More troubling were the reports from survivors, who spoke of loved ones vanishing alongside the hostile ghosts, as if some fundamental barrier between the living and the dead had been temporarily erased. In the aftermath of the Geist Tide, the Imperium was forced to reevaluate its approach to warp ghost phenomena. Syrah 92's breakthrough provided a foundation for new defensive technologies, leading to the development of spectral resonators that could create safe zones in ghost-infested areas. The Inquisition, recognizing the broader implications of the incident, established the Ghostwatch Protocol. This initiative aimed to identify potential hotspots for large-scale ghost manifestations before they occurred, allowing for preemptive action. Astropaths across the Imperium were tasked with monitoring the warp for signs of gathering spectral energies, their findings relayed through a newly established network of fortified listening posts. The Adeptus Mechanicus, spurred by Syrah 92's insights, redoubled their efforts to understand the interaction between warp phenomena and Imperial technology. This led to a renaissance in the field of psychic engineering, with new emphasis placed on developing machines that could affect both material and immaterial realms. Perhaps most significantly, the Geist Tide incident forced a philosophical reckoning within the Imperium. The line between the living and the dead, once thought inviolable, now seemed permeable. This realization sent shockwaves through Imperial dogma, challenging fundamental beliefs about the nature of the soul and its journey after death. The ecclesiarchy found itself grappling with difficult questions. If the dead could return en masse, what did this mean for the promise of peace in the Emperor's embrace? Schisms emerged, with some factions viewing warp ghosts as lost souls in need of guidance, while others denounced them as abominations to be purged at all costs. In the political arena, the incident reshaped power dynamics within the Imperium. Sectors that had invested heavily in ghost-repelling technologies suddenly found themselves elevated in importance. Conversely, worlds that had dismissed the threat as superstition scrambled to adapt, often at great cost. The Geist Tide's impact extended beyond Imperial borders. Xenos races, observing the event from afar, drew their own conclusions. Eldari Farseers saw it as a grim portent, a sign of the weakening fabric of reality. Necron Cryptex, ever wary of warp phenomena, accelerated their research into anti-ghost technologies, seeing in the incident both a threat and an opportunity to prove the superiority of their ancient sciences. As news of the event spread, a new breed of opportunists emerged. Rogue traders and less scrupulous elements of Imperial society began trafficking in artifacts from Helios Secundus, claiming they possessed ghost-repelling properties. While most were fraudulent, some exhibited unexplained properties, becoming sought-after prizes in the shadowy markets of the Imperium. The incident also had unforeseen consequences for warp travel. Navigators reported increased difficulty charting courses near Helios Secundus, as if the massive spectral event had left scars in the very fabric of the warp. This led to the establishment of a quarantine zone around the system, with only specially authorized vessels permitted to enter. In the years following the Geist Tide, Helios Secundus became a focal point for pilgrims and seekers of forbidden knowledge alike. Despite inquisitorial efforts to restrict access, the planet's reputation as a nexus of spectral activity drew those fascinated by the mysteries of life, death, and the realms beyond. The Geist Tide incident stands as a watershed moment in the Imperium's long war against the horrors of the warp. It demonstrated both the terrifying potential of large-scale ghost manifestations and humanity's capacity to adapt and overcome even the most ethereal of threats. As the ripples of this event continue to spread across the galaxy, one thing remains clear. The barrier between the realm of the living and the domain of the dead is more fragile than ever before. The Geist Tide incident reshaped the Imperium's approach to warp-based threats, with far-reaching consequences across multiple sectors. In its immediate aftermath, a surge of ghost activity rippled through neighboring systems, as if the spectral invasion had weakened the fabric of reality beyond Helios Secundus. Worlds previously untouched by significant warp phenomena found themselves grappling with sudden ghost infestations. The mining colony of Ferox 7 reported entire shaft networks overrun by spectral miners, their ethereal picks striking phantom veins of ore. On the agri-world Verdant, ghostly crops sprouted alongside their material counterparts, leading to a crisis of faith among the local population. The Adeptus Mechanicus, galvanized by Mago Syra 92's breakthrough, launched Project Spectral Aegis. This initiative saw the rapid deployment of modified void shield technology to key Imperial worlds. While effective, the strain on resources was immense, leaving lesser planets vulnerable. Inquisitorial response to the aftermath varied dramatically between Ordos. The Ordo Malleus advocated for aggressive containment, proposing the use of exterminatus-level weaponry on worlds deemed irrevocably compromised by ghost activity. In contrast, the Ordo Xenos pushed for capture and study, seeing in warp ghosts a potential weapon against alien incursions. This ideological split came to a head on the frontier world of Novus Lux. When a ghost outbreak threatened to overwhelm the planet's capital, rival inquisitorial factions clashed over the appropriate response. The resulting conflict not only failed to address the ghost threat, but also left the world's defenses in disarray, ultimately leading to its fall to a tyrannid splinter fleet. The ecclesiarchy faced its own turmoil in the wake of the Geist Tide. Some priests embraced the phenomenon, preaching that warp ghosts were the Emperor's chosen messengers. Others condemned such beliefs as heresy, leading to schisms within many dioceses. On Ophelia 7, a prominent cardinal declared a crusade of exorcism, mobilizing millions of faithful to combat spectral incursions with prayer and faith alone. Astra Militarum regiments found their tactics and equipment woefully inadequate against incorporeal foes. The Departamento Munitorum scrambled to develop new protocols, but the sheer variety of ghost manifestations made standardization nearly impossible. Some regiments resorted to employing sanctioned psychers as frontline troops with mixed results. Space Marine chapters adapted with their characteristic efficiency, though not without cost. The Ultramarines' 3rd Company, deployed to quell ghost activity in the Hadex anomaly, returned with only half their number, the survivors speaking of battles against fallen brothers risen as spectral warriors. The Night Lords, ever opportunistic, seized upon the chaos to launch a series of devastating raids. Using the cover of ghost incursions, they struck at weakened Imperial worlds, sowing terror and reaping a grim harvest of gene seed and slaves. Beyond the Imperium's borders, other factions grappled with the aftermath in their own ways. Craftworld Eondon, already intimately familiar with the line between life and death, intensified its efforts to master warp ghost phenomena. Spirit Seers developed new techniques to bind friendly ghosts to wraithbone constructs, creating ethereal guardians that could match incorporeal threats in their own realm. The Tau Empire, initially skeptical of what they perceived as superstition, found their technological superiority challenged by an enemy their sensors could barely detect. Earth-caste scientists worked feverishly to adapt their technology, resulting in the XE-Alth-9 Ghostkeel battlesuit. Equipped with prototype phase shift generators, these suits allowed Tau warriors to engage spectral enemies on equal footing. High Necron dynasties viewed the proliferation of warp ghosts with a mixture of disdain and opportunity. Recognizing the threat posed to their awakening tomb worlds, Cryptex accelerated the development of null field matrices. These devices, capable of creating zones entirely cut off from the warp, proved effective against ghosts, but also attracted the attention of more powerful warp entities. In the underhive depths of Necromunda, a new strain of ghost-touched humans emerged. These individuals, known as spectrals, exhibited limited ability to interact with warp ghosts. While feared and persecuted by many, some gangs actively sought to recruit spectrals for their unique talents. The Alpha Legion, ever the masters of disinformation, seized upon the widespread fear and confusion to further their inscrutable goals. False reports of ghost activity were used to manipulate Imperial forces, drawing them away from the Legion's true objectives. In several instances, Alpha Legion operatives disguised themselves as warp ghosts, using hololithic technology to sow chaos behind enemy lines. Rogue traders capitalized on the new reality, with some specializing in ghost-free trade routes that commanded premium prices. Others delved into the dangerous but lucrative business of ghost artifact retrieval, braving haunted space hulks and abandoned worlds to recover items of power. The Adeptus Arbites found themselves facing an unprecedented wave of spectral crime. From assassination by Ethereal agents to theft facilitated by ghostly accomplices, the very nature of law enforcement had to evolve. Specialized Phantom Precinct units were established in major hive cities equipped with technology to detect and apprehend incorporeal lawbreakers. Perhaps most concerning were the reports of Chaos warbands attempting to harness warp ghosts for their own ends. The Thousand Sons, in particular, showed great interest in the phenomenon, seeing in it a potential source of forbidden knowledge. Several demon worlds became focal points of ghost activity, their already reality-warping environments further distorted by the presence of spectral legions. As the Imperium struggled to adapt to this new threat, whispers of a greater danger began to circulate. Some among the Ordo Chronos theorized that the increase in warp ghost activity was merely a precursor to a larger incursion. They pointed to ancient prophecies that spoke of a time when the barriers between realms would crumble, allowing the dead to walk among the living en masse. Whether these dire predictions would come to pass remained to be seen, but one thing was certain. The galaxy had entered a new age of uncertainty, where the line between life and death, reality and nightmare, had become blurred beyond recognition. In this shifting landscape, the ability to navigate the spectral tides would determine the fate of entire civilizations. The imperative to combat warp ghosts spurred unprecedented technological innovation across the Imperium. Magos Tira 92's breakthrough with void shield modulation laid the groundwork for a new field of study: spectral engineering. Adeptus Mechanicus forges churned out prototype devices designed to detect, repel, and even capture ethereal entities. The Ghostbane Aegis became standard issue for inquisitorial agents and elite guard units. This personal force field generator created a bubble of stabilized real space, shielding the wearer from spectral touch. While effective, its high energy consumption limited operational duration. Vindicare assassins adapted their Exodus rifles with phase-shift ammunition. These specialized rounds could transition between material and immaterial states, allowing them to strike warp ghosts with lethal precision. The technology proved temperamental, with some rounds phasing out of reality entirely, never to be seen again. The Grey Knights chapter, ever at the forefront of anti-warp warfare, developed the Null Matrix. This psychically attuned device created a field that forced warp ghosts into a quasi-material state, rendering them vulnerable to conventional weapons. Its use, however, placed immense strain on the wielder's mind, limiting deployment to only the most psychically resilient warriors. Efforts to communicate with warp ghosts led to the creation of the Vox Mortis. This arcane device, combining Vox technology with psychic resonators, allowed limited communication with cooperative spectral entities. Inquisitors of the Ordo Xenos saw it as a valuable intelligence-gathering tool, while the Ordo Malleus feared it could be exploited by malevolent warp beings. The Adeptus Astra Telepathica introduced the Ghost Veil Mantle, a psychically imbued garment that rendered the wearer invisible to most warp ghosts. Astropaths equipped with these mantles could operate in heavily infested areas, maintaining vital communication links even under spectral siege. On the defensive front, the Mechanicus unveiled the Spectral Purgation Array. These massive installations, when activated, bathed entire hive blocks in anti-warp energy, temporarily banishing all ghostly manifestations within their range. The immense power requirements and potential for catastrophic overload meant they were reserved for only the most vital Imperial locations. Not all innovations came from official Imperial sources. The tech heretics of the Logician's cult developed the Soul Mirror, a forbidden device that could trap a warp ghost's essence and transfer it into a living host. While the Inquisition hunted down and destroyed most soul mirrors, rumors persisted of high-ranking Imperial officials using them to cheat death. Rogue traders, operating on the fringes of Imperial space, brought back Xenos artifacts that demonstrated different approaches to ghost management. Eldari spirit stones found new applications in human hands, with some Inquisitors controversially using them to bind cooperative warp ghosts as spies and informants. The Tau Earth caste, driven by necessity, accelerated their research into warp-based phenomena. The X-22 Ghostwalker battlesuit emerged as their answer to spectral incursions. Equipped with phase shifters and null field generators, these agile suits allowed Tau warriors to engage warp ghosts on equal footing, albeit at great risk to the pilot's sanity. Necron technology, ancient beyond reckoning, proved surprisingly effective against warp ghosts. Canoptech wraiths, modified with null field matrices, could phase into a state that allowed them to hunt ghosts in their own realm. Several Inquisitors established uneasy alliances with awakened Necron dynasties to acquire this technology, despite the obvious dangers. The Adeptus Ministorum, not to be outdone by technological solutions, developed new rituals and relics to combat the spectral threat. The litany of spectral banishment, when intoned by a priest of sufficient faith, could temporarily drive away lesser warp ghosts. Chapels were outfitted with sanctified lumens, special illuminators that revealed the presence of hidden spectral entities. In the underhives of Necromunda, a black market for ghost hunting gear flourished. Spook zappers, cobbled together from scavenged tech, proliferated, despite their tendency to explode catastrophically. Gang warfare evolved, with territory control now dependent on the ability to cleanse areas of troublesome spectral squatters. The Dark Eldar, ever seeking new forms of entertainment, developed the Soul Snare. This cruel device could capture warp ghosts and subject them to torments that transcended the boundaries of life and death. Humans unlucky enough to witness its use were often driven mad by the experience. Orc mechs, in their inimitable fashion, approached the ghost problem with characteristic brutality. Gork's Ghost Busta became a popular modification for standard shooters, unleashing wild bursts of warp-disruptive energy with each pull of the trigger. That these weapons were as likely to blow up in the user's face as hit their target did little to dampen Orc enthusiasm. Not all technological developments focused on combat. The scrutiny pattern spectroscope allowed for detailed analysis of warp ghost composition and behavior. This led to the identification of distinct species of ghosts, each with unique characteristics and vulnerabilities. The telepathic acquire of Mars made strides in predicting warp ghost manifestations. By combining astropathic divination with cogitator analysis of warp current data, they could forecast likely outbreak zones with increasing accuracy. This allowed for preemptive deployment of countermeasures, saving countless lives. Perhaps the most ethically questionable development was the Revenant engine. Created by a radical faction within the Adeptus Mechanicus, this device could generate artificial warp ghosts by imprinting psychic echoes onto warp energy. While its creators claimed it was meant for study purposes only, the potential for weaponization was obvious and alarming. As technology evolved to meet the ghost threat, so too did tactics and strategies. The Astra Militarum's Tactica Imperium underwent significant revision, incorporating new doctrines for spectral warfare. Special emphasis was placed on combined arms approaches, coordinating conventional forces with psychic and technological countermeasures. The Ordo Xenos established Ghost Watch stations in key sectors, massive void-borne installations dedicated to monitoring and studying warp ghost activity. These stations served as early warning systems and research centers, though several were lost to sudden, overwhelming manifestations. As the Imperium adapted to this new reality, the nature of warfare itself began to change. Battles were now fought not just in real space, but across the threshold between dimensions. The ability to perceive and affect both material and immaterial foes became a critical skill for commanders at all levels. The long-term implications of these technological leaps remained uncertain. Some within the Imperium feared that in their haste to combat warp ghosts, they risked further weakening the barriers between realms. Others saw it as a necessary evolution, the next step in humanity's long war against the horrors of the warp. Amidst the chaos of the warp ghost phenomenon, certain individuals rose to prominence, their actions shaping the course of events and the Imperium's response. Inquisitor Valerius Rohn of the Ordo Malleus emerged as a leading authority on spectral entities. His treatise, Phantasmal Tides, a compendium of ethereal threats, became required reading for inquisitorial acolytes. Rohn's methods, while controversial, proved effective in containing numerous ghost outbreaks. Magos Sira 92, architect of the breakthrough on Helios Secundus, continued her work with fervor. Her creations, particularly the Spectravale Disruptor, saved countless lives. However, prolonged exposure to warp energies took its toll. Reports of her increasing eccentricity and obsession with bridging the spectral divide raised concerns among her peers. The Space Marines produced their own heroes in this new form of warfare. Captain Tiberius of the Ultramarines 4th Company gained renown for his tactical innovations in ghost combat. His Codex Spectral, an addendum to the Codex Astartes, outlined strategies for engaging ethereal foes. Tiberius's finest hour came during the defense of Calth, where he led a mixed force of Astartes and Skitarii against a massive ghost incursion, emerging victorious against overwhelming odds. On the darker side of the conflict, the heretic Magos Umbra gained notoriety for his forbidden experiments with warp ghost essence. Operating from a hidden forge laboratory in the Ghoul Stars, Umbra sought to create hybrid beings, part material, part spectral. His creations, while abominable, displayed terrifying combat potential. The Inquisition placed Umbra at the top of their most wanted list, but he remained elusive. The Eldari Farseer Iana Arianal of Craftworld Iyanden became an unexpected ally to some Imperial factions. Her deep understanding of the spirit realm proved invaluable in joint operations against particularly dangerous warp ghost manifestations. Iana's motives remained inscrutable, but her assistance undeniably saved many human lives. Among the Adeptus Ministorum, Confessor Markov Stern rose to prominence with his fiery sermons on the spectral scourge. Stern preached that warp ghosts were a divine test from the Emperor, meant to separate the faithful from the doubtful. His Ghostfire crusade saw millions of zealots march against ghost-infested worlds, armed with little more than faith and sanctified flamers. The criminal underworld produced its own legend in Wraith Korik, a notorious information broker specializing in ghost-related intelligence. Operating from the depths of Necromunda's underhive, Korik's network of spectral informants provided invaluable data to both Imperial authorities and less savory clients. Despite numerous attempts on his life, Korik remained untouchable, protected by secrets that could topple sector governors. Archmagos Biology's Vern Hecaton of the Adeptus Mechanicus made significant strides in understanding the physiological effects of ghost exposure on humans. His research led to the development of anti-spectral inoculations, crucial for those operating in heavily infested zones. However, rumors persisted that Hecaton's breakthroughs came at the cost of countless live test subjects. The rogue trader Duchess Ilaria van der Planck carved out a niche as a supplier of exotic ghost hunting equipment. Her flagship, the Spectral Sovereign, became a mobile bazaar of arcane devices and Xenos artifacts. While technically operating within her warrant of trade, Vanderplank's activities drew increasing scrutiny from the Inquisition. On the frontier world of Tanith's Rest, the Psyker twins Gideon and Gabrielle Morn gained a reputation as ghost whisperers. Their ability to communicate with and sometimes control warp ghosts made them valuable assets to local authorities. However, their growing influence and the cult-like following they attracted raised red flags for the Ordo Hereticus. The Necron overlord Amontech of the Sautek dynasty took a keen interest in the warp ghost phenomenon. Viewing it as further evidence of the corrupting influence of the warp, Amontech launched a campaign to cleanse affected worlds using advanced null field technology. This put him in direct conflict with Imperial forces, despite their shared goal of ghost eradication. Within the Officio Assassinorum, the operative known only as Revenant gained legendary status. A Calexis assassin modified with experimental ghost hunting augmetics, Revenant specialized in eliminating spectral threats that were beyond the reach of conventional forces. The full extent of Revenant's abilities remained classified, but their track record spoke volumes. The tech priest Dominus Xar 37 of the Adeptus Mechanicus became both celebrated and feared for his work on the Anima Captis project. This initiative aimed to develop technology capable of harnessing warp ghost energy for use in Imperial machinery. While the potential benefits were enormous, the ethical implications and the risk of catastrophic failure kept many of Xar 37's peers at a distance. Lord Commissar Victor Lentz earned the moniker Ghostbane for his unwavering leadership in the face of spectral horrors. Lentz's ability to maintain morale and combat effectiveness among troops facing otherworldly terrors made him a valuable asset on ghost-plagued fronts. His execution ratio was surprisingly low, as he found that the threat of becoming a warp ghost often proved motivation enough for wavering guardsmen. The Ordo Xenos Inquisitor Lilith Abyssal took a unique approach to the ghost crisis, focusing on its potential Xenos origins. Her controversial theory that some warp ghosts might be manifestations of long-extinct alien species led her on expeditions to the galaxy's farthest reaches. While largely dismissed by her peers, Abyssal's research uncovered several previously unknown Xenos ruins with unusual spectral properties. As the Imperium grappled with this new reality, these individuals and many others like them shaped the course of the conflict. Their triumphs, failures, and questionable decisions would echo through the annals of Imperial history, leaving an indelible mark on humanity's struggle against the spectral tide. Despite extensive research and countless encounters, the true nature of warp ghosts remains shrouded in mystery. Competing theories abound, each supported by tantalizing evidence yet fraught with contradictions. The Ordo Malleus posits that these entities are a new form of demon, born from the psychic residue of souls lost in the warp. This explanation, while fitting the Ordo's worldview, fails to account for the often non-hostile nature of many ghost manifestations. Radical elements within the Adeptus Mechanicus propose a technological origin for warp ghosts. They suggest that malfunctioning warp drives or ancient archaeotech might be tearing holes in reality, allowing these spectral entities to slip through. Critics argue this theory neglects the clearly psychic nature of many ghost encounters. The enigmatic harlequins of the Eldari speak of warp ghosts as echoes of potential futures or alternate timelines bleeding into reality. This perspective aligns with some observed phenomena, particularly instances where ghosts seem to reenact events that haven't occurred yet. However, the Harlequins' cryptic explanations and hidden agendas cast doubt on the reliability of their claims. A controversial hypothesis gaining traction among some inquisitors is the psychic evolution theory. It suggests that warp ghosts represent a new stage in human psychic development, with the souls of psychers evolving to exist in a state between real space and the warp. While intriguing, this idea raises uncomfortable questions about the future of humanity and its relationship with the Immaterium. The true extent of warp ghost influence on Imperial society remains unknown. Reports of ghost-possessed individuals walking undetected among the population have led to waves of paranoia and witch hunts. The Ordo Hereticus struggles to distinguish between genuine cases of spectral infiltration and mass hysteria. The long-term effects of prolonged exposure to warp ghosts on human physiology and psychology are poorly understood. Some studies suggest that individuals regularly in contact with these entities develop heightened psychic sensitivity, while others report a gradual erosion of the subject's connection to reality. The Adeptus Mechanicus closely guards the results of its research in this area, fueling speculation about potential applications or dangers. The relationship between warp ghosts and the souls of the deceased remains a topic of fierce debate within the ecclesiarchy. Some factions argue that ghosts are the emperor's chosen, returned to guide the faithful, while others condemn them as abominations that mock the natural order. This theological schism threatens to create lasting rifts within the Imperial cult. The role of warp ghosts in the grand schemes of Chaos Gods is another point of contention. Some Ordo Malleus inquisitors believe that the proliferation of ghosts is part of a complex plot by Tzeentch, the Chaos God of change and sorcery. Others see it as an unintended consequence of the growing instability of the warp, beyond even the control of the ruinous powers. The connection between warp ghosts and certain xenospecies raises troubling questions. The Necron's null field technology's effectiveness against ghosts suggests a link between these entities and the fundamental nature of the warp itself. Meanwhile, the Tyrannid's apparent disinterest in worlds heavily infested with warp ghosts has led some xenobiologists to speculate about a possible deterrent effect. The origins of the Ghostmere, vast regions of space where the barriers between real space and the warp have become permanently thinned, remain unexplained. These areas, characterized by constant ghost activity and unpredictable physical laws, defy traditional understanding of both Imperial and Xenos scientists. Expeditions into the heart of the Ghostmere often fail to return, with those that do bringing back conflicting and often impossible accounts of their experiences. The phenomenon of ghost worlds, planets where the entire population appears to have been replaced by spectral duplicates, continues to baffle Imperial researchers. These worlds function in eerie semblance of normality, with ghost inhabitants seemingly unaware of their own incorporeal nature. Attempts to study or reclaim these planets have met with limited success and high casualty rates. The existence of spectrals, humans with an innate ability to perceive and interact with warp ghosts, raises questions about the future evolution of the human species. Are these individuals the next step in human psychic potential, or a dangerous mutation that threatens the purity of the human form? The Adeptus Mechanicus and the Inquisition maintain a close watch on known spectrals, their fate often depending on the particular ideologies of local authorities. The recurring phenomenon of ghost fleets, armadas of spectral vessels that mirror famous battles or lost expeditions, challenges the Imperium's understanding of time and causality. These fleets often appear in systems with no recorded history of such engagements, leading some to speculate about parallel timelines or prescient visions of future conflicts. As the Imperium delves deeper into the mystery of warp ghosts, each answer seems to spawn a host of new questions. The nature of reality itself appears to be shifting, with the boundaries between the material and immaterial becoming increasingly blurred. In this new paradigm, the fate of humanity hangs in the balance, caught between the familiar solidity of the physical world and the unknowable depths of the spectral realm. The proliferation of warp ghosts has irrevocably altered the fabric of the Imperium and the galaxy at large. As the 41st millennium draws to a close, the lines between the material and immaterial realms continue to blur, reshaping the nature of warfare, politics, and human existence itself. Imperial military doctrine has undergone a radical transformation to address the omnipresent spectral threat. The Astra Militarum now incorporates specialized Ghostbreaker units into its standard order of battle, equipped with experimental anti-ethereal weaponry. Space Marine chapters have adapted their combat doctrines, with many maintaining dedicated squads trained in exorcism rites and wielding sanctified war gear. The economies of entire sectors have shifted to support the burgeoning ghost hunting industry. Forge worlds churn out ever more sophisticated detection and containment devices, while frontier planets rich in spectral activity have become unlikely centers of pilgrimage and research. This economic realignment has created new power dynamics within the Imperium, with ghost-free worlds commanding premium status and resources. Spiritually, the Imperium faces a crisis of faith. The ecclesiarchy struggles to reconcile the existence of warp ghosts with established Imperial doctrine. Some view the phenomenon as a test of faith, while others see it as a sign of the Emperor's waning power. New sects have emerged, some embracing the ghosts as divine messengers, others calling for their wholesale destruction as abominations. The Inquisition finds itself stretched thin, attempting to manage both the direct threat of hostile spectral entities and the societal upheaval caused by their existence. Radical factions within the Ordo Malleus advocate for controlled use of bound warp ghosts as weapons against the enemies of the Imperium, a stance that has led to bitter internal conflicts. Technologically, the imperative to combat and understand warp ghosts has driven innovation at a pace not seen since the Dark Age of technology. The Adeptus Mechanicus, in collaboration with radical inquisitors and even Xenos allies, pursues ever more esoteric research. Breakthroughs in fields such as quantum entanglement and psychic engineering promise to revolutionize everything from communication to space travel. The political landscape of the galaxy has shifted dramatically. Some sectors, overwhelmed by ghost activity, have effectively seceded from Imperial control, forming autonomous enclaves dedicated to new philosophies of existence that blur the line between life and death. The High Lords of Terra debate endlessly on how to address these breakaway realms, torn between reintegration and quarantine. Interactions with Xenos races have taken on new dimensions. The Aldari, long accustomed to dealing with souls and spirits, find themselves in high demand as advisors and mercenaries. Necron dynasties, viewing the proliferation of warp phenomena as an existential threat, have in some cases formed uneasy alliances with Imperial forces to combat particularly severe ghost infestations. The Tyranid hive mind's apparent aversion to heavily ghost-infested worlds has led to the controversial practice of deliberately cultivating warp ghost activity as a deterrent. Entire systems have been sacrificed to create haunt zones, a strategy that has sparked fierce debate within the Imperium's highest echelons. Criminal enterprises have evolved to exploit the new reality. Ghost runners specialize in smuggling goods and people through spectrally active regions, using the unpredictable nature of these areas to evade Imperial patrols. A black market in captured warp ghosts and ectoplasmic artifacts flourishes despite harsh inquisitorial crackdowns. The nature of human augmentation has taken a spectral turn. Experimental procedures to infuse the living with ghostly essence promise enhanced psychic abilities and even a form of immortality. While officially banned, these treatments attract desperate individuals willing to risk their very souls for power or survival. Education and training throughout the Imperium now include mandatory courses on ghost recognition and basic defense techniques. Children grow up performing spectral awareness drills alongside traditional combat training, a grim reflection of the new threats that await them in adulthood. Scientific understanding of the universe has been upended. Long-held theories about the nature of reality, time, and consciousness require radical revision in light of ghost phenomena. A new breed of scholar inquisitors attempts to reconcile Imperial dogma with these paradigm-shifting discoveries, their work closely monitored for signs of heresy. The emergence of ghost-human hybrid communities in some sectors presents a unique challenge to Imperial authorities. These enclaves, where the living and the spectral coexist in strange harmony, defy traditional governance and often become hotbeds of radical philosophies and technological innovation. As the boundary between life and death becomes increasingly permeable, the very concept of human identity is called into question. Philosophers and tech priests alike grapple with the implications of existence as a spectrum rather than a binary state. The definition of what it means to be human or alive may never be the same. In this new reality, the Imperium of Man stands at a crossroads. The warp ghost phenomenon, once seen as a temporary crisis to be overcome, has become an inextricable part of human existence. As the galaxy hurtles towards an uncertain future, one thing is clear. The age of ghosts has only just begun, and its full implications for humanity and the universe at large remain to be seen.